The classic family history writing dilemma. How much say should your relatives have in the stories you write? Should they get to approve what you put in your family history? Should you skip over anything they find uncomfortable? Honestly, it depends. Let's break down this topic because there's no one-size-fits-all answer to the question. Howdy, welcome to the Write Your Family History channel. My name is Devin Noel Lee, a published family history author who wants you to learn how to quickly write non-boring family histories to share your legacy with your loved ones. You don't have to be a trained author to write a family history, so join me as I teach you how to turn names, dates, and places into enjoyable narratives. First, let's talk about situations where family input is helpful. If your family offers insights, correction, or details that improve your story, why wouldn't you incorporate what they say? Maybe Aunt Bonnie remembers that Granny took in boarders during World War II to help pay the bills while she was caring for an infant and Grandpa was overseas. Such a story adds richness to your narrative and often comes out during your beta reading or preliminary publication phase where you write the story, your family reviews it, and gives you feedback. Additionally, some family members can also help spot mistakes. It's easy to confuse dates, identify the wrong ancestral home in an urban environment, or not know that Uncle Gene was adopted. All of these contributions are always welcome, and I definitely incorporate them into family stories. But what about the skeletons in the closet? Here's where things can get tricky. What do you do when your relatives don't want certain stories shared? Or they want you to rewrite history? Every family has skeletons. Maybe someone had a child out of wedlock, is embarrassed they were divorced multiple times, went to prison, or battled addiction. You get the idea. You can have documentation that such stories are factually accurate. Yet some of your relatives may still prefer to keep the closet doors shut on these skeletons. So what do? Here's my take. Be honest, but considerate. You don't need to publish a hit piece that's all about airing the family dirty laundry. That's not family history writing. That's gossip. And it can be detrimental to family relationships. For one book that is a classic example of what not to do is the Prince Harry's book called Spare. Whether you agree with how hard his life was or not, the book reads more like a tell-all tabloid than a family history, and it was designed to hurt. If your intent is to harm rather than document reality, then I would advise against sharing the stories. Actually, go ahead and write the hit piece, but don't publish it. Let it sit in your computer, let it sit in a desk, come back to it in 5 or 10 years and see if your tone changes. See if you can write with compassion. I'm not asking you to rewrite the past, but I am asking you to have a diplomatic approach. What does that mean? It means acknowledge facts, but don't sensationalize them. Let me give you an example. If your family has a dark secret that resembles the movie The Burning Bed, then simply stating that a woman killed her husband by setting their family home ablaze will be shocking enough without you adding your commentary. I can just picture that and how horrifying that is and wonder what would have drove her to do that. You don't need to give me the commentary. You can include the details of the abuse the woman experienced to demonstrate that the series of events that led up to her final act did not come out of nowhere. And still, you're not adding the commentary. You're just giving me details. So by stating the facts in a neutral tone, you will enable your family members to understand what happened and then let them make the final decision of what they're going to take away from the story. I also suggest that some of the darker or emotionally difficult to read stories shouldn't necessarily be readily available for the youngest family members. Let me give you a non-family history example to explain what I mean. I had a policy that when my kids were growing up, they couldn't read the Harry Potter book series until they were 13. For the most part, my children respected that rule, and many of them were grateful that they didn't read some of the content in the later books at an earlier age. Back when Harry Potter came out, many kids grew up with the series, so by the time they got to the later books, they were mature enough to handle that. But when your kid is 8, do they really need to be reading stuff that is more appropriate for a 14, 15, or 16-year-old? I didn't agree. And so that was a rule I had. Now let's bring that back to family history. Some of your family stories should be recorded but protected until family members are of an age to read about the more mature subjects. How do you do that? Well, put it on a high shelf, or don't let the little kids know that these stories exist, and tell people, hey, be careful before you share this family story with all of the youngins. Here's a suggestion that might be helpful with some of the darker stories, is you can leverage the preface of your family history. Forewarn family members that you are striving to write a family history that's historically accurate, regardless of modern sensibilities. You can write something like this. In the early 1900s, the Jones family faced challenges to shape their journey. Some of these stories remain difficult to talk about today, but they are part of our shared legacy. As the author, my goal is to present the facts in as complete a story about these individuals as possible. I leave it for you to decide the takeaway from our shared heritage. Before we continue, if I have given you value during this video, please click the like button and subscribe. Then I would really love it if you would leave a comment or a question or other thoughts. My favorite part of doing the Write Your Family History channel is reading your comments and getting to know your challenges and hopefully motivating you to write those stories. Another thing I want you to consider when you're talking about should your family members have say in what you write is consider where you're sharing your story. Publishing doesn't always mean going public with a bestseller, posting it, and trying to get it published and be on the bookshelves of Barnes & Noble or whatever the bookstores are these days. You can self-publish your family history, bind a few copies for relatives, and keep it in your home or deposit one at a local genealogical library for safekeeping. It doesn't have to be plastered all over the internet either for the whole world to read. You don't have to hand out copies at a family reunion or as Christmas presents and then go, did you hear about our ancestor who went to jail? Did you know great Uncle Earl abused his kids and was a raging alcoholic? No. How we handle some of the stories that are more sensitive and our family doesn't want recorded will chart the course for future generations. They can learn from and make better decisions, or they can be bitter and break familial bonds. The decision is partly about how you approach the topic. But be warned, even if you document the stories with honesty and diplomacy, some family members may still be upset. At that point, I will counsel you that their reactions and responses are their responsibility. Again, if you strive to be honest yet neutral. In the end, can your relatives have a say in what you write? You will need to make a series of choices. There will be other pros and cons to the decision to write or not write about your family, and I want to hear what our community has to say about this topic, so be sure to comment below. However, I always go back to the peace and growth that I've benefited from by hearing the stories of the unpleasant side of my ancestors. The behaviors and decisions of my relatives finally made sense. And then I can decide what I could do with the newfound information. Most importantly, I got to understand myself and say, oh, this is going to take some work. If you have challenging stories, remember this goal. Write with neutrality and honesty. Stick to the facts and let your readers form their own opinions. As I hinted before, I want to hear from you. How do you decide how much input your relatives have in family history stories? Do you let them read the story before you publish it? Do you ask for their feedback? Do you skip over sensitive topics? There's lots to discuss, and I hope you will take advantage of the comments section. Remember, every family will handle this differently, but we can all get some guidance from each other in order to make the best decision for ourselves. It's time for viewer comment section here on Write Your Family History Fanatics. In the video, is it okay to publish unproven stories in your genealogy? A number of comments came through. June Butka, who is a subscriber for 2 years, sadly, in a family, the story was kept silent until the third generation in the family. Grandmother, daughter, and grandson all died by their own hand. Now the family is bringing the story to light to help others seek help. I think a story about the tragedies, including environmental, cultural background, and family dynamics, could help others. I love the fact that sharing the stories is about helping others seek help, helping people heal, and so forth. It is so important to write the stories. We need to be careful. As always, the genealogists, we want to be honest while also being neutral. We need to clearly document if a story is unproven, but we shouldn't whitewash the past or judge our ancestors for their choices of the past either. Neither extreme is good, but telling the tale of the story of the facts on the ground can help so much. So I'm really glad that she shared that comment. June shared a second comment and said, in the Stearns family genealogy, there's a story that Charles River in Boston was named after an ancestor's nephew. He fell off the Arabella of the Winthrop fleet in 1630 when he got off the boat. I added the tidbit with this phrase. I like this. It's a great suggestion. It's a great story, but unlikely since Charles River was named after the Prince of England in 1614. John Smith, yes, the explorer, called it the Massachusetts River after the native tribe living there. When he returned to England, they wanted an English name. So several little tidbits while debunking a story can help you be more accurate. So you can include that unproven story about it being named after Charles, who fell into the river, but then you can go and correct the story. So I really like that. I really like she included an example of how she debunked the family story. Kat Walker is a subscriber for 2 weeks at the time of this recording. If there's stories about an actual family member, I write them down in private notes area so they're not forgotten. Then I'll talk to a few family members and see how they react. Then I decide if I switch them to the open comments area or just keep them in the notes. I think what she's referring to, that the private notes and the public comments, that is over on Ancestry. But you get the idea. She's going to hold things within her private sphere of genealogy research until she talks with family members, gauge their reactions, and then decide what to make public. I really like that. Kat also shares this thought that if the story is about someone who never was, I have a section that I've titled Tall Tales and Family Legends. I just include the stories there. That's a great tip. I love it. ML Coffee, a subscriber for a year, said, my husband's family had lots of family stories. Everyone told me to look into them and write about them. I did the research and found them all to be completely false. They were supposed to be related to a famous person, and I went so far as to contact the biographer who compared the story with the facts, and we found it couldn't possibly be true. I managed to debunk all the family stories with proof. I told the family my findings, and they refused to believe me, even with proof. I added the stories to the end of the project, stating that they were stories that had been found in the family forever, but were not true. And I included my research and left the decision on whether to believe up to them. I don't know what to say about people who are presented facts and don't want to change their worldview. Actually, there's been a number of podcasts about the challenge of changing worldviews, even if what you believe is challenged by facts. So it's not uncommon, but it is kind of comical. So as genealogists, all we can do is record what we found, debunk where we can, and then let a reader decide what they're going to believe. Remember to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe on your way out. Then go write your family history.